Hi, my name is Betsy Friedrich and I work in customer care here at C&T Publishing. Today I would love to show you how to use our translucent vellum paper for foundation paper piecing. Come on, let's go check it out. The translucent vellum paper comes in a 30 sheet pack. It is 8.5 by 11, which makes it perfect for printing your PDF patterns. If you purchase an ebook from us on ctpub.com, you can print that PDF from your home computer, and from there you can enlarge the pattern or reduce the pattern depending on what size you want and print it directly from your computer. But if you happen to have a paper pattern that you're wanting to trace from, the translucent nature of this also makes that very helpful. But let me show you one more reason that having the translucent vellum paper is really great, especially for beginners. So here is the unicorn block from Mary Hurdle's So Magical. I have trimmed it apart to show you how to use the vellum on one of these pieces. So if you're not familiar with foundation paper piecing, the way it works is kind of like paint by number. You go 1 to 2, and then you sew the third piece on, and you sew on these lines here. So when you sew on those lines, you actually have to put the fabric to the back side of the vellum, which is why it's so helpful to have something that you can see through on the back side, particularly when you're dealing with a project that is with lots of different angles and things. It's not quite as straightforward as something that has very straight lines. So in an effort to make sure that I cover my seam allowance and everything that I need, I always use really obnoxiously large pieces of fabric to make sure that I cover my seam allowances for when I'm going to sew the next piece on. And you also have to be careful, because if you wanted to like put a nice straight 1/4 inch seam there like you're used to doing, you would want to lay the fabric at an angle, because that's at an angle, but then you're not going to cover this piece down here. So already it's helpful to make sure that you're covering the fabric that you need to have. So you need to not only put this at an angle enough to where you can trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance once you've sewn this together, you need to also make sure when you put the second piece down that when you fold it back with your 1/4 inch seam allowance, that it's actually going to cover that piece of number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and just pin this together. I also forgot to mention that I cut my piece out with my 1/4 inch seam allowances on the paper, so that when I turn it over, I also know that I have 1/4 inch for like here where I'm going to need to sew that next piece together. So now that I've pinned this together, I'm going to turn it over, and with this nice see-through paper, I can see that I've got fabric coming up enough to be able to still have a 1/4 inch seam allowance when I need to trim this after I sew. I'm going to sew on that line right there. That's not exactly where my seam is going to be when I turn it back, but I can tell that I've got a 1/4 inch there. And when I turn it back with the see-through paper, I'm going to have more of a 1/4 inch there. I'll go stitch this down and show you what I mean. All right, so I have now trimmed this piece down. And what's really helpful once you get to this, this vellum, this third piece that goes way up, that's one of the reasons I chose this particular piece to demonstrate. Truth be told, I am a pretty terrible foundation paper piecer. I'm really good with things that have straight lines like this, but when there's something like this, I need this vellum paper so much, and I might even still make a mistake. You can probably see that because there's already some fold lines. All right, so I'm going to turn it over. I know that I can go like this and see, all right, my sew line is going down at that angle. So I'm gonna need to place this about right here, and I'm gonna be able to, and then fold it over like that and make sure that it's gonna cover that piece. But first I wanna make sure I gave myself enough seam allowance. So again, we're gonna be able to turn it over, and I lined it right up with that green seam allowance, so I know I'm gonna have enough when I go sew that third piece. And here we are, all stitched down, and we can trim our seam allowances off. Don't let your fabric fold over like that, you'll cut it off. I've made that mistake more than once too. All right, here we go. And then, because I included this as my 1/4 inch seam allowance, I got a little guide for myself. And I'm going to go trim this off. And when I go to trim this off, I guarantee you I would not have covered that piece correctly without the translucent part. But okay, you say, now I want to know what the tear test is like. Does it come out easily? Well, let's see. If I can get a hold of it, it will. Yep, perforates and tears easier than paper, even the tiny little pieces. And that is the translucent vellum for foundation paper piecing. Let us know what you prefer in the comments. There are lots of different foundation paper piecing papers out there, but this one in particular is my favorite. Thanks. We'll see you again next time.